My Very Last Life, Chapter 15, on Substance and Style. Actually, I don't know what this is about. My mind keeps going around in circles, of course, as always, and that's nothing new. But I keep coming back to this thing of substance and the search for substance, something that's real, something that gives you this weighty feeling like it's real, you know? And I got to tell you, whenever I think about that, I come back to the Middle Ages. It's the Middle Ages. Well, I'll come back to that, or I won't. It depends on, these circles, it's hard to say how these circles come around, but they never necessarily come around to the same place where they began. So let's get on this circle, and we'll start with a friend of mine. I guess he's becoming a friend. He's a partner, Matthias, and here in Germany, Berlin, he asked me a year or two ago to help him out as a co-host on a reading stage. They call it reading stage, Lesebühne in German. And what it is, it's a little stand-up, spoken word. There we go. Excuse me, just getting comfortable. Spoken word literary stage show. It's in a bar. In the bar is my favorite bar. Naumann 3, Naumann 3. And the third Thursday of every month, he would invite two writers who were like maybe poetry slammers or unpublished writers or writers who had just published in some small, insignificant publishing house that, no one knows about. And he would ask them to come in and read some of their texts. They're called texts nowadays. It's not a short story or a novel or a poem. They're texts, so it's kind of like, indecipherable what it's really about. But still, they would read these texts, and sometimes they were good, and sometimes they were bad, and very mixed, of course, and which is what you get in this kind of lower stratum arena. It's not, this is not John Updike and Gore Vidal going at it here in Naumann 3. It's a couple of poetry slammers from around the corner, and but it's we always had a few people in there, and it was always fun, and it was interesting, and all these guys, of course, even if I didn't like them, I'm more the guy who I don't even like John Updike and Gore Vidal. I mean, I go straight to, I don't know, Cervantes and Graham Greene. I don't. I don't read. There's a lot of writers out there I am not interested in. I can't say I don't. I want to say I don't like them, but I can't say I don't like them because I don't know them, and also because, I kind of like all writers in general just because they write, but I'm not actually interested in them. So, if you put a poetry slammer from around the corner who, talks about, her first boyfriend not calling back or something, right? And that's the poem. That's her big thing. And I just roll my eyes. But then I get Gore Vidal talking in a very elaborate language, and very authoritative and articulate, and he's talking about some bullshit. And I'm just rolling my eyes too, because I don't care about that either. So what's the difference? In the end, there's no difference. So it was never about the quality of the writers. Some were good, some were bad, some I really liked, some drove me nuts because they were just completely trivial crap. But of course, that's normal. That's what you get everywhere. Okay, so you just accept that. If you're putting together this stage show of literary artists, and that's what happens. That's normal. And And most of the people were chosen by Matthias. He was the guy who chose the people, and rightly so. He has a certain taste, and of course he disapproved of a lot of suggestions that I made, or a lot of my taste, just as I disapproved of his. So that's fair enough. But and now we're doing this more and more together in time of Corona online, and it's becoming a big thing. We're really putting a lot of time and effort into it. And I got to say, I really like working with this guy. And I thought about why I like him. And it's because he has been humbled by life, just like me. We have that in common. I don't know if he knows it. I think he probably does. He's had ambition. He had a novel out, which was hopeful at first, but was not all that well accepted, all that well received. I guess it was well received, but it was kind of passed over. It was just like 99.9% of all novels. People didn't really notice, and that's the hard truth about writing, is that 99.9 of everything you do does not get noticed. That's the way it is. And I think he was disappointed in that way. But I always had this feeling, this vibe from him, that he was willing to be humbled. He accepted this humbled fate he had, and he was determined to make the best of it, to take it and make something out of it. And that was this Lesebühne, this reading stage, this stage show, this writing show that he did. And he did 3 different ones. I was only now I do 2 with him. Now he only does 2, and then we do both together. Back then he did 3, and I only did 1 in association with him. So our relationship has grown. But it's this humbleness about him, the acceptance of he's almost my age. He's older, and he was never acclaimed to be the great, brilliant writer that we all want to be acclaimed to be. I've never talked about it. I mean, maybe he never had these ambitions, but of course he did. He's a writer. All writers want to be acclaimed, And it never happened to him, and it didn't happen to me either. So we both understood this. I have a feeling when I think about him that he understands it just like I do, that we have the same experience, that we are both humbled characters, striving to accept what the world gives us and at the same time make the best of it. So our ambition is not gone, but we just accept more that we may not make it and that our ambitions may always be on a lower level. So this reading stage, he's doing, whatever, John Updike, or who's a German flavor of the month, Daniel Kehlmann, or Murakami, or Francis, what's his name, the American guy, these big literary guys. They will never come to us, of course, because we're small. Okay, so he accepts that, and I accept that. And that's good, and it's right, because it's like Astrid said, if you want to live, you have to accept that life, at one point fucks you up the ass. It's going to do that, and it's right. And then once it does that, once it's over and it's had you and it's fucked you up the ass, then it's calmed down and it's willing to be nice to you. And so that's the stage that we're at, Matthias and I. Life has fucked us up the ass, and we've gotten it over. We've gotten through it, and now we're sitting around negotiating, if it's going to be nice to us or not. And we'll see whether that happens. Okay, but having said that, the other part of this relationship is that we talk about literature, or we think about literature, or we negotiate about literature, what literature is. And excuse me, I just yawned there a minute, and I'm going to drink a little sip of this watered down whiskey, watered down bourbon. and water it down, much like Klaus did. I have this habit from Klaus, so that it lasts longer without getting, so I don't have too much a hangover, or maybe no hangover at all in the morning when I drink whiskey. And I drink whiskey when I do this podcast. So we've been humbled, and we negotiate on literature. And he has a completely different idea of what literature is than I do. Of course, we both accept that it's all literature. It's just not what he likes and doesn't like. For example, I've done as a it's kind of a it's a commercial project, but it's also a project that I like to do, which is cat stories. I like doing cat stories. I've written a number of cat stories, and I'm publishing them and trying to see what I can do and if it will work to publish them as self-publishing, as standalone ebooks, and kind of experimenting with the self-publishing world with using these cat stories I've written, and they're nice stories. They're fucking good stories. They're really good stories. They're human. They're thoughtful. They are touching. They are a little bit kitschy often, but not always. Usually kitschy, a little bit kitschy, and just normal. They're not, they don't try to be art. And I'm just getting away from trying to be art. I don't want to be art. I don't want to be high literature. I just don't want any of that. I want just to, entertain a normal person and maybe make him or her think about, life a little bit. Maybe touch them if I can. And so of all the things I'm writing, there's a lot of big variety of writing. The things he hates most are the cat stories. Because that's just, clearly that's the casebook example of what kitsch in literature. You write cat stories. Of course, great writers have written cat stories. Eliot wrote cat stories. They've all, Poe wrote cat. I mean, they've all, everyone, great writers have always loved cats, and they've all got sentimental about cats for some reason. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. But still, for him, literature has like a social message. I think he writes a lot about refugees. The refugee crisis is a big thing with him. He's worked with refugees before, even before 2015, the date of the year that we talk about as the refugee crisis in Europe or in Germany, and he's worked with children and suffering children who have been abused and refugees who have been abused and have hardships, and so all these what we would call now marginalized persons suffering, people who are suffering. That is his theme, and it's a social theme because there's always a kind of a under a subtle undercurrent of the state is guilty of this. And I've always looked at human suffering as not necessarily being a problem of the state. Maybe it's just because I'm an American and Europeans think that they tend to give the state more responsibility in their lives than Americans do. That's possible. But of course, we have this so-called socially aware literature also in America. So it's not, you can only go so far with that analogy. But he's always looking for some kind of social aspect, and I'm always looking for some kind of parable. I need a parable. I need, even like with the cat stories. It's the cat story just published here for Valentine's Day. It's called the Casanova of Hill Street. It's just a little sweet love story. Two introverts, follow their cats around, or follow a cat around, and meet and fall in love. Okay. But of course, the parable of love is what in this cat is doing. They observe the cat, and the cat has kind of a strange, how he reacts and how he acts. It's his behavior is a little bit strange. And it's like half biology, which is, you think of cats behaving, when they mate, as just purely driven by some kind of hormones, and half personality. And I take this as a parable of love, of course. Okay, so I'm always looking at this parable, and he is always looking for, or seems to be, maybe I'm overinterpreting his work. Maybe you should, if you're interested, you should talk to him or read his own stories or listen to him. He reads the stories on these Lesebühnen, on these reading shows. He's always looking for some kind of way to blame the state for something. And I had to think about that recently, and it came up because he had one or two writers that he liked, and there were one or two of them were actually good. They were not bad, and their subjects were, I think, neo-Nazis and refugees. And so these are kind of these hot button things that a German intellectual will say are bad things. So they're very safe. They're subjects that everyone piles up on. So it's subjects that you don't have to reveal anything of yourself. You don't have to talk about yourself or about your own insights or about your experience with life and death and the world. All you have to do is kind of read the paper and kind of absorb what the general feeling is about how horrible people are suffering and horrible things, and you have to repeat what people generally feel about the suffering of the world today, and that for me is not actual literature, but for him it is. And I looked at these people, and there was a cabaretist from Austria who wrote a book about a young neo-Nazi meeting an older man who had survived the Holocaust, and he was a communist, and he'd been, he wasn't Jewish, but he was a communist, and he had survived the Holocaust, survived the concentration camps, and he taught the kid, about how, left and right and wrong, and left is good and right is bad. Okay, so before this child drifted into, some kind of right extremist, white supremacy kind of thing, and so that's all well and good, and it's all true, and it's all important, but it seems kind of like the trendy kind of thing that everyone in this certain leftist category of intellectual writing is doing. It's like everyone is doing that. And then on another show, we had a guy that I had picked up. It was actually suggested by a publishing house, by an academic and scientific publishing house called Beck, and he had written a biography about Kissinger, and he was a professor of history. He was a historian of a German history, a German professor of American history, and he wrote this long, huge, definitive work about Kissinger, and it was very well received. And it's probably a really good. I haven't read it. We did an interview with him, and we did the show, and but I didn't actually read the book. And then I compare these two kinds of people, and then Matthias had a lot of other suggestions for, young writers who were passionate about writing, about refugees or about, why Nazis are bad. And then here we have on the other hand, we have this guy who dedicated his entire life, a long life, he's an older guy, to history, to subject, to finding out the truth about history as much as he could, or much as you can. And I look at these two things, and I'm thinking, what is the difference between how he views literature and how I view literature? And it has something to do with substance, for me at least. When I look at these guys, these young guys, these trendy leftists who are saying things that you would expect a leftist intellectual to say. It's just It's just, you read it all in the newspapers. You read it in the opinion section of the newspapers. It's not special. It's just Nazis are bad. Okay. And refugees are suffering. Oh, I get it. Fine. But it's not anything that only I can write. Only you can write. There's nothing there like only James Joyce could have written that book. But anyone can write a book about, a young man drifting into the right, which is bad, and everyone's alarmed. Oh no, we can't drift. He can't drift into white supremacy. And then he's saved, and he realizes in the end that white supremacy is bad and evil. Okay, we got it. It's not news, and it's not unique. It's not special. It's not a unique voice. And it feels to me like it doesn't have substance either, because you can do it without actually being it. The thing is, with a historian, he studied his subject for, 30, 40 years. So he knows what the subject is. I disagreed with him with a lot of things. I thought that he was kind of a little bit of a leftist reactionary. I felt that he was, very much involved, very much all about proving all the horrible things that Kissinger did and proving that Kissinger was a bad man, but not about the context of what was going on and whether that context, we all profit from the downfall of communism, because democracy and capitalism worked and survived and won. We have a great life, and this professor does too. And so, but this question he didn't go to. He just said, all the horrible, the moral horrible things, and it's a long litany of terrible things that Kissinger did. Okay, but I'm thinking, yeah, is that all though? Is that really, does the world exist? Can you really understand the world you're in just by listing faults, just by listing mistakes of people? And so my issue was him, which I didn't bring up in my job in this little online literary show that we did, Lager for Helden, with this guy, was just to give him a platform and ask him about his book and interview him about his book. And so and basically sell the book, and which is what we did. And he, and he has a right to do that. And he has dedicated all his life to American history, and he has a certain aspect, a certain attitude, and that's his right as a writer. I respect him for that. I respect his right for that, and I hope that he respects my right as a writer to write differently. But the thing is, I look at these two guys, and I look at this kind of this trendy politics, and it's so light and fluffy and empty. It's true. I mean, Nazis are bad, clearly. But it's just kind of all the same thing. It's just a lot of sayings. It's just a lot of, I'm right, and look at me, and there's nothing really there. I do not sense a substance there. But with this guy, I sense substance, because he did the research, because he dedicated his entire life to this thing, and he found out about it. He may be right or wrong. And of course, and the anti-Nazi leftist, poetry slammer is clearly right. There's no doubt about that. But there was just something of substance that this historian had that the leftist intellectual poetry slammer did not have, even though she was right. I mean, there was no doubt that she was, I criticize the left a lot just because, they're often full of bullshit, but she was right. I mean, Nazis are bad, right? There's, come on. And when I think about the difference between Matthias and me, that's what I think about. There's a certain kind of style, a political, a moral style that is only style. And it has a place in writing because, like I said, it's true. And it's popular, and it influences people. And so if a true thing influences people to good, then it's good, right? So I can't argue about that. But there's still something insubstantial about it, something that is kind of style or even trendiness that is not actually, that does not go beyond that. And I need that substance. My entire life has been a search, a yearning for substance. Growing up in Hawaii, it's kind of not, it's a kind of a superficial culture. It's a lot about surfing and being out in the sun and having a good day, and lucky you live Hawaii and aloha and all that. And all of that is wonderful, and I miss it deeply. I miss it horribly. It's like I'm here. It's snowing outside, folks. I miss that, and I miss the human warmth of Hawaii that is not here. There's a lot of, there's racism. I was beaten up regularly in Hawaii just because I was white, but there's also a lot of human warmth and a lot of human forgiveness and a lot of human generosity in Hawaii. The real aloha, this aloha feeling that Hawaiians are so proud of. It's true, it's there. But I wanted to get away from, the surfing and the sayings, and I wanted to get to intellectualism and to history and to some kind of substance. And I got to Germany. I studied the Middle Ages, or the literature of the Middle Ages. And for me, that world, even though I wasn't good at it and I left it, that world, the academic world, specializing in the Middle Ages, that for me is a world of substance. When I think about substance, I think about the Middle Ages. I think about that period of time when I was meeting and finding and discovering Wolfram von Eschenbach, German poet who wrote Parsifal. The man or the woman, I think it could very well have been a woman, who wrote the Nibelungenlied, a political epic that is just amazing. It's not a heroic epic, it's a political epic. It's a proto-feminist epic. It's amazing. Walter von der Vogelweide, who was very cerebral. I mean, if you look at what he wrote about love, he wrote love stories. That was he was a love poet. He was very much thinking about, categories and analyzing love. Here's a guy, yawning there. Here's a guy in the Middle Ages analyzing love. Even if a lot of what he wrote is, for how we see now love today is nonsense. They had a much different way of looking at love. He was so analytical. I love that. And the Stricke, the weaver, the tail weaver. He was not actually a good poet. He's little known, and he was not actually good. He was like me, He was full of hope and love of literature, but not actually that good. He wasn't a genius, but he loved a great variety of different kinds of literature, from classical, myths to kids' stories to fairy tales to, foreign, dramas, Arabian Nights, things. He would take elements, all these, and put them together. He wrote satire, and he wrote errant knight adventure tales, romances, and animal parables and sermons. And I just love that. I love his love of different kinds of literature. Better than actually he a lot of things that I wrote, I think he failed. They were not that good. But I love him for what he did, and I look back. Oh, and how about the Ackermann, which is a book I've always wanted to rewrite. I have a draft of a rewrite of the Ackermann, which is it's a dialogue. It was written in, I guess, 1405, which is late Middle Ages. A dialogue, almost a legal, like two lawyers arguing between a peasant and death. And death has taken the wife of the peasant, and the peasant wants the wife back. And the peasant says, who you, death, who the fuck do you think you are? What the fuck do you think you can do anything you want? You're not right. That's not right. We have to live by you. You don't have to live by the rules that we live with. And really did like a lawyerly, legal attack on death, and death had to defend himself every step of the way. So the it really is a dialogue where the peasant talks a page, death talks a page, and it's arguing back and forth, pros and cons. And in the end, neither of them win. In the end, God comes down and says, "You're both right in one way, and you're right in the other way. So you both are right in a way," which I guess is the right way to do it. I would have liked to see, the Ackermann, the plowman, the peasant win the fight, but he didn't, of course. But that's a great book. And then up to the early modern age, Simplicissimus, this funny, satirical, bloody, violent story about the 30 Years' War. This has substance to me, and I look at modern literature and I just think it's blah, blah. Much of it I think is blah, blah. Not all of it. That's not, I'm being cruel, but I think of it as too trendy. There was one a girl, a writer here, a British writer, a black British writer who wrote in Germany, and so she's kind of a flavor of the month, literary wonder in Germany. And she's coming out with her first novel in a couple months, and we tried to get her to come to our show, but she refused. It was not good enough. She was getting too much attention, I guess, from others, or maybe we weren't politically correct enough for her, or maybe she was just getting too much attention from larger venues, which is fair enough, right? She wants to promote her book. So, but I didn't really care that she went, because I look at her and I don't respect her that much, not as much as I should, because she's in this woke culture, this post-Me Too, complain about everything culture, this trendy culture, about marginalized people, which, it's a good trend, right? As trends go, it's marginalized people should be taken into the mainstream, or the mainstream should be made aware of them. Okay, so that's all good. But it's also very trendy, and we're talking about people who basically have learned from their classes at the university and talking to other students, and kind of like a biotope, a closed, hermetically closed, subculture, how to talk and how to write in a way that, seems to have a lot of substance, but really doesn't, because it's just repeating the same thing, their own thing again and again. Because I haven't read the book, so maybe it is actually a great book. Probably often when I read these books that I complain about, I'm actually very impressed with them. So I can't, don't take me seriously when I say this, but I want another academic writer who's studied a certain subject for 30, 40 years and knows what he's talking about. I want someone with substance. The search for substance. Substance versus trend, not style. Trends, trendiness. The flavor of the month. The grada of a year back, the grada, the climate change grada. She'll be gone. She's gone already, I guess. She'll be gone. And another grada will pop up. Another one, another flavor of the month will pop up. And another Me Too generation will pop up. And another, we had all this, of course, in the 70s, and then again in the 80s. You have these things come up again and again, and they're trends. And, Marlon Brando does not accept his, the Academy Award. And it goes on and on. But where's the substance? I want that substance. And the thing is, with my life, I spent a lot of my life rejecting trendiness, questioning trendiness. And that's what people hate about me, too, because they say something which is basically true. I don't know, Nazis are bad. And, what can you say about, they're right? But when my big mouth say, yeah, but we know, so tell me something I don't know. And then that's an attack, of course, and they feel attacked, and they attack me, and they hate me for not accepting them for what they're doing, which is just trend, because I don't like these trends. I don't like the trendiness of it. It feels flimsy to me. It feels useless to me. It feels like, getting on the bandwagon and like lemmings, like everyone's following the trend. Like if the trend now is, Nazis are bad, but if the trend were Nazis are good and Jews are bad, they would be following that trend too. That's why I'm skeptical about it. That's why I hate it. I hate it. But it's not enough to hate trendiness if you can't find the substance. And in writing, in reading, in doing the reading show online, and doing whatever I'm doing, I find it easier to reject and criticize trendiness than it is to find substance. I can see substance, or I have a feel of substance in the Middle Ages, even though, just like Walter von der Vogelreiter, his ideas of love were very intelligent, but they're still silly. How he saw love, I don't see love at all. I think it was just not modern. It's just not a modern way of looking at love, that's all. But still, he approached it from a feeling, from an attitude of substance. And so here I'm facing, the last few years of my life, and I have one or two books in me. I have a list of books that I want to write, like 10 books, but I may or may not be able to get around to them. And I'm looking at this list and I'm asking myself, is there substance here? One book is a rewrite of Ackermann. It's the peasant and death and the peasant. And is there substance in it, or am I just going on and in love with the sound of my own voice? I don't know. It's hard to tell. There's a love story there, but is it a love story of substance? I don't know. There's the story of losing your faith in what you believe in a very brutal, dark way. But is it substance, or is it just being brutal and dark for the sake of being brutal and dark? I don't know. This search for substance, it bothers me, and it never lets me go. And by God, give me a few more years that I can create something of substance before I die. I haven't managed to do it yet. God grant me the time and the energy and the concentration and the determination to write one book of substance before I vanish into nothingness and forgetfulness. That's it. That's all I have to say. Good night. That's it, folks. And thanks for listening. Tune in again next week or tomorrow or whenever it is I do this again. Whatever, I don't know. If you're interested in the things that are really important to me, I write them in books and I put them on videos. Check out my books on Amazon.com or my YouTube channel or my Twitter and Facebook feeds, or subscribe to my newsletter. That's kind of a lot now that I say it like that. Or any of the above, whatever. I hope I can contribute something to your life, or to someone's life, anyone's life really, in some way. I appreciate your support, and I wish you all the luck and success and happiness and fulfillment in your life. Take care till next time.